Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to our esteemed speaker, faculty members, organizers, and all of our passionate participants joining us online from across different campuses and regions. As student innovators, engineers, creators, and future technology leaders, we spend countless hours thinking about how to build things, how to make applications faster, systems smarter, and products more efficient. But how often do we stop to ask ourselves, who are we building for and who might we be accidentally leaving behind? For a long time, the tech and design world has treated accessibility as an afterthought, something to fix for, accommodate after a product is already built. But true innovation doesn't just retrofit, it includes from day one. Today, we are here to challenge that traditional mindset and explore what it really means to embrace universal design, moving beyond mere accommodation to creating environments, products, and experiences that are natively accessible to everyone. An initiative of this scale and purpose is only possible when like-minded communities come together. We at IETC West are deeply grateful for this wonderful collaboration with IEEE ATI and IEEE ETSOC. On behalf of IETC Vidya Academy of Science and Technology, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you all to 𝗓𝗘𝗘𝗘, Voices Shaping an Inclusive Tomorrow. Before we dive in, it's my pleasure to hand it over to Rimida to formally welcome our speaker and get today's virtual session started. Rimida, over to you.
Thank you, Bhumika. Once again, a very good evening to everyone. It is my pleasure for welcoming you all to the today's session, Include Talk Voices Shaping Inclusive Tomorrow. Today's session, Inclusive by Design, Moving from Accommodation to Universal Design, invites us to rethink the way we approach innovation. Rather than designing first and adapting later, universal design encourages us to create solutions that are accessible, usable, and meaningful for everyone from the very beginning. It is now my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker for this evening, Ms. 𝗓𝗶𝗰𝗹𝘂𝘀𝗵𝗵, Chief Digital Officer at Punarjeeva Technology Solutions. With the extensive experience in digital transformation and inclusive technology, she has been actively driving innovation that places accessibility and human-centered design at its core. We are delighted to have her with us today to share her insights and experiences on creating solutions that truly leave no one behind. Without further delay, I invite Ms. 𝗓𝗶𝗰𝗹𝘂𝘀𝗵𝗵 to deliver today's session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Bhumika and Rimita. Are you all able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay, thank you for confirming. Okay, so good evening, everyone. 7 p.m. on a Friday night might not be a good time to have a session, but seems you will have to bear with me and postpone your plans for the next 1 hour. I'll try to make the session quick so that you can, enjoy the rest of your Friday evening. Now, as you have already seen from the poster, my name is 𝗓𝗶𝗰𝗹𝘂𝘀𝗵𝗵, and I am the Chief Digital Officer of Punarjeeva Technology Solutions, which is a social enterprise that is working towards building an inclusive society. Prior to my stint with Punarjeeva Technology Solutions, I was in the corporate world for over 15 years, and that is where I was introduced to the terms like inclusion, diversity, accessibility, etc. But, they were just corporate terms for me back then. Today, they have all become a part of my passion, and that is what landed me in Punarjeeva Technology Solutions. Okay. Now, I want to start today's session with a line from what an Australian comedian and a disability activist had said during her talk. Her name was Stella Young, and what she mentioned was, I'm so sorry, I forgot to share the slides, okay? Please also confirm if the slide is available. I'm just sharing it. Is the slide visible? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So the line was, no amount of smiling at a flight of stairs has ever made it into a ramp. I'll repeat. No amount of smiling at a flight of stairs has ever made it into a ramp. I am opening my session with this line because this is what the entire session is actually encapsulating. Okay, we are conditioned to think of inclusion as something, as an attitude problem, right? There is kindness. It can be solved by empathy. It can be solved by art. It can be solved by positive outlook, towards the disability problem. That is how we are conditioned. 𝗬𝗂𝘀𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗀 point, and the whole point around which this session, revolves, is that inclusion is not just an attitude problem. Attitudes do matter. Definitely, we have to be empathetic. We have to be kind. We have to have a lot of willpower to overcome the disabilities. But inclusion is actually a design problem. And unfortunately, we do not think of design as much as we need to think about it. Okay. So attitudes, you have a lot of empathy, you have a lot of kindness, you have a lot of willpower, but all those will not really help in building ramps, right? What will help in building ramps or solving the disability problem are the systems. And how do systems come into the picture? It is through good infrastructure, and what brings in those infrastructures or what brings in those processes is probably the last thing that we have on our mind, which is design. And that is why the session is called Inclusive by Design. Moving from accommodation to universal design, we will see how human diversity, how the different kinds of people, that is included in our society is very, very important for designing or for solving a problem. Okay. So nobody sits in a meeting room and, decides that, okay, let's build systems that are not convenient for visually impaired people. Or, let's make this hard for left-handed people. Let's make this hard for disabled people. Nobody sits in a meeting and decides all of those, which means exclusion or barriers are not created on purpose. Barriers get built in because systems are normally designed around an imagined average user, and an average user actually do not exist. Whenever we develop solutions, you're all college students, you might be working on a lot of projects, you might be working on a lot of problem statements, as part of your mini projects or your final year projects. You might be working on all of that, and you're all trying to create certain problems, right? Now, at the end of solving every problem, there is a user. But when we are creating solutions for all the projects or for any problem that we take upon, we always have an imagined user in mind. We never think about, or we never go and meet an actual user for whom the problem is, for who the problem is actually getting solved. So always there is an imaginary user for whom the solutions are getting developed. Now the best, the average imagined user, there is a well-documented story from the US Air Force in 1950 that actually built cockpit to fit the determined based on body measurements that was taken way back in 1926. The pilots kept on crashing their airplanes for no obvious reason. So a young lieutenant called Gilbert Daniels, okay, he was given an assignment of remeasuring over 4,000 pilots on key body dimensions that included height, arm length, chest size, and a lot of other body dimensions to find out what is the new average based on which the cockpit can be redesigned, or what could be the reason as to which the cockpit, the pilots in the cockpits were crashing their planes. What he found out was extraordinary. Not even a single pilot out of more than 4,000 fell within the average on any body dimensions. The average pilot or the average user for this cockpit was designed was just a mathematical fiction. A cockpit was built for the average fit nobody at all. It did not fit anybody. So what do you think was the Air Force's solution? Do you think they found a better average with these 4,000 plus pilots, made a new average and then redesigned the entire cockpit out of it? Well, the answer is no, they did not create a new average. Rather, they made the seats, the pedals, and the straps adjustable. Okay. Now that single decision is the ancestor of something that we all use even today. Can anyone just tell me what is it quickly? You can type in your answers, or you can, you can talk it out. So this design change that they had mentioned is actually the ancestor of something that we use every day, even today. Anybody who can quickly tell me? I think from the the picture on the screen itself, it should be quite evident on what is that design, or where do we use this design today? The adjustable seats, the adjustable pedals, the adjustable straps. Where do we use them? Okay, if you don't want to speak out, you can always type in the messages. Okay, but let's make it a little bit interactive. Otherwise, I am not sure whether you'll be sleeping or not.
We use it in a car most of the time.
Exactly. Exactly. That's the right answer. Every adjustment that they made in 1950 for a cockpilot was the foundation of the car seats, or the adjustable car seats that we use today. Okay. So that is how a design so you saw where the problem is. The problem was there was an imagined user based on whom the cockpit was assumed for. Actually, when you look at it, no such average user exists. They made a design change, which was not to change the cockpit for a new user, rather than make it adjustable for any body measurements that would come in. When a system is available to all, but usable only by a narrow range of people, exclusion has already been designed into it. Okay. Now, exclusion is not a bad decision as it is. It is actually an accumulation of small defaults that nobody thought to question. Now, what are defaults? I will tell you at a later point of time. Okay. A good design, or rather a design in general, okay, determines who can participate independently, who must request help, who must disclose a disability, and who quietly withdraws without ever being counted as excluded. So it is a design that determines all of this. Now, the examples that you see on this slide look largely unrelated, right? I'm talking about stairs, I'm talking about inaccessible forms, I'm talking about 9-to-5 scheduling, I'm talking about small prints. They are totally unrelated, completely belonging to different domains. But they all share one feature, that is, someone treated one way of participating as the normal way. Now, when you look at stairs, when you have an entrance which is only having stairs, it means that somebody assumed that walking and climbing is what everybody can do, or rather walking or climbing is universal. Everybody in the whole world should walk and should climb. That is why there might be entrances where stairs are the only way of commuting. When you have a PDF which is only having images, the person who might have created that assumed that anybody looking at an image can understand everything. Everybody should be able to see an image, is what they might have assumed. A 9-to-5 event, when you have a lot of 9-to-5, we see, right, job timings, 9 to 5. Your job timings are from 9 to 5. This institution operates from 9 to 5. So you see these boards a lot of places. Now, what does that assume? Now, on the offset, it looks very normal. It's been given in a lot of places. People even think that is the norm, that is the normal working hours, 9 to 5. That's how many jobs are even described. It's a 9 to 5 job. That's how people describe it. But that particular description assumes that every participant is free to travel at that point of time. Nobody needs to extend beyond 5 o'clock. People are available to work at sharp 9 o'clock. That is an assumption over there. And finally, small prints, low contrast prints, assume that this is okay. Everybody in the whole world has got the same level of vision, same level of lighting, same level of distance that needs to be catering to the document. Now, this is what is known as default. When we say that 9 to 5, this is a 9 to 5, this is a default system. Now, default is very powerful because, take awareness of who actually fit them. Now, for a person who is able to read, understand an image, or who can look at a PDF, look at the image and understand what it means, does not experience that as inaccessible. Okay, a person who is working in a very nice location, who is able to reach office at 9 o'clock, leave the office at 5 o'clock to reach home comfortably, does not see that as inaccessible. Somebody who's got really good vision, who can read small prints in documents, does not think that small prints are inaccessible. So universal design begins with the habit of noticing. We need to notice, what was treated as normal. And when we say something is normal, is there somebody who actually pays this price of the normal system that have been created? So that is where we have to understand exclusion. To understand exclusion, we have to start identifying each and every aspect of what we create. If it is possible by us, is it going to be possible by the person next to you, the person in your home, the person in your community, the person in your country, the person of gender, age, capability, ability, everything? And that is where, you can reduce the amount of exclusions that the services or the products will provide. Now, there are three ways societies think about disability. Definitely, you know about the first one, that is the medical model, which treats disability as an individual deficit. That is something to be treated. It has to be fixed. It has to be managed from a clinical perspective. Now, when we talk about medical model, the disability problem sits inside the person, right? Second one is the social model. Social model really flips it. It tells you the problem is not with the person, but it is because of the barriers that have been built in the system. When you tell the stairs are the problem, not the legs. So it looks at it more from a societal perspective. The human diversity model goes one step ahead. Okay, whatever exception you have in body, in the mind, in your sensory perspectives, is not something that has to be accommodated. It has to be the normal. It's not that, okay, I will build in ramps or I will bring in lifts because there might be disabled people, or there might be elders who can travel. There might be probably people using wheelchairs. That should not be an accommodation that we are doing. Rather, it should be the norm. From the design aspect, when you start building, an infrastructure, when I'm starting to, put out a building in place, or when I'm trying to put out a plan, from the very moment, I should expect the various inclusive points that has to be decided. Not when somebody comes and tells me, oh, how do I cannot use the stairs. What is the workaround for this? Well, I have a mother who is not able to climb the stairs. How do I make sure that she enters the building? It should never be an afterthought. The design should expect all these exclusions, should expect all these variations that are there in the human body, in the human mind, in the human senses from the very beginning, and include it into your design. And that is what is very important. We have to understand that there are various kinds of people belonging to various categories, and how is it at least possible to include them in the design aspect. Okay. Now, what do you mean by accessibility and inclusion? We are hearing a lot of words today with respect to, building an inclusive society. We hear about words like accessibility. We hear words like diversity. We hear words like inclusion. So what is accessibility and what is inclusion? Okay. Now, accessibility will actually ask, whether a person can reach, a person can understand, a person can use something. So suppose I'm talking about a classroom, or I'm talking about, some kind of conference that is happening. Can the student enter the room? Okay. Can the participant hear or read the presentation? Can the person complete the form? Okay. So all these things, can the screen reader read the page? Now, all those kind of things are actually accessibility. Now, I will tell you, my presentation here is a very inaccessible presentation because there is no screen reader. There are no captions that I have included, right? Which means, unless and until you don't choose that captions feature that is being provided here, you will not be able to understand what I'm trying to say, which means at the onset, my presentation is a very inaccessible presentation because there might have been participants who cannot listen to what I'm trying to say. So that's accessibility. Can you do something? Can you perceive something? Can you read something? That is accessibility. What is inclusion? What happens after the accessibility point? Okay, the student enters the classroom, but can the person participate in the same activity? Can they make choices? Can they contribute to ideas? Can they be a part of the activity just like anybody else in the room? So accessibility is often the doorway, and inclusion is what happens inside the room. So that is the difference between these two, accessibility and inclusion. So suppose there is a conference room that has got a ramp and a person on a wheelchair enters the room. Okay, so as such, the building has got an accessible feature, which is a ramp. The person enters the conference venue or the classroom or whatever, let's say an internal auditorium or whatever. The participant enters. The registration desk is too high. If he has to go to the stage, there is no ramp there. It only has got steps. Now, there is a networking activity that has planned where it is required that the people have to move around. The entire, the greet and meet is over tea and snacks, and the tea and snacks are placed on a high table where everybody has to stand and discuss with each other. Instructions are only given, through loudspeakers, etc., etc. So, is the building accessible? Definitely, the building is accessible because the person was able to enter, with the help of ramps. But is it inclusive? It is not inclusive because none of the features that were inside the conference room made this particular participant a part of the whole experience. That is where the difference is. Okay, just similarly, we might have a tendency to think, when I say a person in wheelchair, we always think that accessibility or inclusion is only limited to people who have got some form of disability. But if I can actually extend the same thing to a classroom, in the classrooms that you're all learning. Now, a student may be in, you might have got admission in your college. You are placed in a classroom. You're given a seat. But this is, there is one thing that many of you might have experienced. A teaching method that your professors are using for imparting knowledge or for imparting education might not be suitable for everybody alike, right? There might be teaching methods, the way the professor or the teacher is trying to teach might be useful to some people. It might not be useful to other people. You will just say, no, I'm not able to understand a word that is being taught in class. The problem is not you. The problem is how that teaching mechanism was designed, how the teaching mechanism was imparted. When we assume that every student in the classroom is able to understand everything in a whole manner, in exactly the same manner, that is where exclusion comes into the picture. So exclusion, inclusion, accessibility, etc. are not something that is pertain to just the world of disabilities or people who who are physically having challenges. It is imparted in each and everything that we are dealing with. Okay. So the question is, can I get in? Once I get in, what role do I have there? I participate just like anybody else is doing, and that is where we have this whole talk about accessibility and inclusion. Okay. Now. Okay, so these are like 4 terms that are very, very important, for understanding or for fixing barriers related to inclusion and diversity. So we have definitely you have the exclusion stage where the system just says, see, the person is not fit. Right? For example, okay, let's talk about, let's forget the world of disabilities for the time being. Let's focus on people like, all of us who are, typical students who have gone to schools and colleges, and the system effectively says, see, this person, does not fit here. The person cannot actually understand the questions that is given in an examination, or they are not able to complete the exams on time. And the difficulty is normally treated as a student's problem. When they say you don't have so much attention, you have not learned well, you need more time. So the focus has always been on you, that you have been excluded. You do not fit the system is what is exclusion talking about. How does accommodation come into the picture? When somebody in the system says, see, let's make an adjustment for this individual. Okay, this person is working very hard, so let's just make some adjustment. Let's just make some accommodation. Let's give him some extra time. Let's give him a scribe, you know, or let's put him in a separate classroom. Probably he might be intimidated by his other classmates. That is why he's not performing well. Let him sit, you know, alone and, you know, write the exam. That is accommodation. Okay, make an adjustment. That is something that we are doing instantly to solve a problem, or to instantly avoid people getting excluded, is accommodation. What does accessibility say? Let's remove the known barriers. See, let's try to understand what this person's problem is. You know, is it because they need more time? Is it because you know, the entire method of assessment has to be changed? Are there any more students who are actually facing the same problem but not able to speak about it? So that is where accessibility comes into the picture. Okay, why rather than writing exams, let's make it, you know, system wise. Let's make the keyboard more accessible, etc., etc. So accessibility comes into the picture when we are removing the known barriers from the very beginning, and we are putting in processes or systems in place which is helpful to a lot of people. Last and the most important thing we are dealing here is the universal design. Create a system where human diversity is expected. We have to realize the point that no two people are the same. No two people with disabilities are the same. No two people without disabilities are the same. Okay, there has to be human diversity. We can never build systems when we say, see, and this is quite, you know, a sentence that most of us might have heard at home, right? You know, like, see, if all your classmates can do it, why not you? All your classmates are getting good scores, why not you? That should be stopped. We can never say just because 90% of the people are doing it, we cannot do it. It is not our problem. You know, there might be certain things that we have to do, but there has to be more appropriate ways. There has to be more appropriate outcomes that will help in changing the system rather than changing the person. Okay, so that is where universal design comes into the picture. So okay, I think in the earlier one we have already covered, you know, so there are lots of terms with respect to, you know, social inclusion. There is accessibility, there is accommodation, there is inclusive design, there is universal design. We often tend to have, you know, you use these words interchangeably in a lot of casual conversations, and that's a problem because it's very important to understand what each of them mean. You know, they are not same at all. They mean different, and they are used to explain different things. Now, so just to summarize what I had, you know, mentioned earlier, accessibility, accommodation. Let me start with accommodation. Accommodation is a response to an individual barrier. Okay, what specific adjustment is needed in this case? What can I do immediately to solve the problem is accommodation. Okay, accessibility is an experience. You know, you cannot always keep on doing accommodations. So you have to make it an experience. And that is where accessibility comes into the picture, where people can read, where people can understand, different people can use it. That is accessibility. Inclusive design is a process, and that is what you all should start practicing, inclusive designs. Whenever you're trying to design a problem, you know, or whenever you're trying to solve a problem, when you're trying to design a solution from the problem, always design it with people for whom you're trying to create a solution. Okay, very often when I take sessions like this, after the session, there is a lot of motivation that builds, you know, in people, especially when I share stories of what happens at Punarjeeva, the lives that we have changed, the lives that have got impacted. Many of them get motivated and come and ask me, you know, we would like to work on a social problem. What should we do? You know, we want to build an app for probably, you know, people with learning disabilities. We want to do something, some kind of AI project for people with motor disabilities. What do I do? You just don't have to do anything at all. All that you have to do is go and meet them. Always start with meeting the users for whom you want to create your solutions. If you want to create a solution for you know, visually impaired people, be with the visually impaired people. If you want to create an application for an elderly person with Alzheimer's, go and spend a day with that person. Only then your solution is going to be an inclusive solution. You cannot sit in your classrooms and decide, okay, I'm going to build a with Alzheimer's, and go to Google. Nowadays, you have multiple platforms that are going to help you with a lot of things. Use cloud, use ChatGPT. Okay, tell me what are the features that have to be there in a mobile application for people with Alzheimer's, people with dementia. It will give you the entire thing. So much so, it will give you the entire code. It will even give you the application today. So there's nothing that we really have to do, right? We have reached a stage where, we just need to give instructions and you have the entire thing in your hands as it is. But then you cannot be sure whether your application can be actually used by a person with dementia. So it's very important to have lived experiences to create inclusive solutions. And finally, we are talking about universal design, which is a much, much broader goal. You need to have environments, you need to have communications, you have to have products, you have to have services that can be used by the widest range of people as far as possible without specialized adaptation. Okay, your product, if you have created it for a person with the elderly, why can't it be used by a person who does not have Alzheimer's, by just another elderly person? Got a little bit of brain injury. So that is what is universal design. We should not keep on creating solutions for different categories of people. Rather, our solutions should be able to cater to a larger set of people. Now, when we say accommodation, when we talk about universal design, inclusive design, we say that from the onset, we have to start thinking about who all can be encapsulated, etc., etc. Does it mean that accommodation is not required? We should not be doing any accommodation to the systems that we create. We should never say that, okay, this is how the system is. We have, used all inclusive principles. We have used all universal designs. This is actually meant for everybody. So we cannot do, any kind of adjustments to this kind of user. Can you say that? You can never say that, because accommodation is not a failure. Okay, accommodation, in fact, is the fastest and the most appropriate way to ensure equal participation. Okay, even in India, the Act for Persons with Disabilities actually says reasonable accommodation is necessary, and it can be done. Provided it is not a burden or it is not proportionate. If all those things are there, accommodation can always be done, because it is a fast way to include a person into the system. Okay, but definitely it has got its own limitations when compared to universal design. Accommodation is more reactive. Someone has to ask. Right now, a person who is, let's say there is a course, or there are some system, okay, that is in place. Probably that person will have to come and ask you to make the changes. Mostly what happens, it will be denied. They'll say it's not possible. It's not part of the system. We cannot change it right now, right? So accommodation is more reactive. It will wait for the system to ask. It will wait for the individual to ask. It will, again, you do adjustment for one person, you will have to do adjustment for the second person. There might be a third person who is scared to ask for adjustment. That person will automatically be left out. Whereas universal design is more proactive, because it anticipates variation. We are predicting variation. We are knowing that, it creates more horizon for everybody. So basically, universal design is individual specific, because we are doing it for one person. Accommodation is individual specific. Universal design is designed for diversity. Accommodation always happens after the barrier is appearing. Universal design anticipates the barriers and puts it into the design itself. If you don't do accommodation, it will be separate. Emotional burden. Suppose there are two students who need to access the same material, who has the confidence and time to read for it. She might get the accommodation. she might get the accommodation. There might be another hearing impaired who is more of a need. If I'm putting it only consider one need, but the design basically has failed both. But it was able to cater to one because one asked and the other did not ask. When you come to universal design, that's not the case. We would have already, we should have already determined that all of these belong to the category. Okay, so the most important thing from this slide is we should never ever think that universal design does not take away accommodation. Okay, even if you design, you design an examination, or you design a system, or you design a process that has been universally designed for a large category of people, we should still anticipate that there will be one student who might require extra time, or who might require additional materials, who might require additional support. So the goal should never be zero accommodation. The goal should be fewer barriers, cater to more number of people, provide more support. Okay, so the mistake you should never say, we have followed universal design. As I said in the beginning of the slide, so we follow universal design, so we cannot provide exceptions. Okay, or vice versa. We are ready to provide accommodation, so there is no need of changing the system. Both these things are wrong. Both accommodation and universal design are complementary. They have to go together. Definitely, the higher purpose is on universal design, but we should always understand that there will be 1% or 2% of people who will still need accommodation to be part of the larger ecosystem. Okay. Now, human diversity is a starting point. I'm coming back to a point that I mentioned earlier, which is, let's not talk about disabilities. Never think when I say disability, what is the first picture that comes to all of your minds when I say disability? We clear? Can somebody type in or anything, or say, when I say the word disability, what comes to your mind?
Handicapped.
Handicapped. Okay, anything else?
Dyslexia, ADHD, all of this.
Okay, I just think one person is always answering. Yeah, that's all there. Anybody else? Have everybody just kept their systems on and gone away? Okay, so I'm sorry, I did not get your name, but as he answered, when I say disability, what comes to his mind, I'm not sure about the others, what comes to his mind is about, handicapped, dyslexia, etc., etc., right? That's the norm. That's what we all think about when we think about disability. But we should always understand that we are all disabled at some point of time. See, we all undergo disability. A person with, a person whose hand is fractured might not be a permanent disabled person, but, for a few weeks, we might be dependent on somebody. We might not be able to carry our tasks on our own, right? What is disability? Unable to do, or the inability to perform is disability. So everybody at some point of time is of grocery bag,
Rishmi, your voice is breaking.
Outside for opening the door. Connection between. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, till where did you listen?
You are talking about
Okay.
disability.
Yeah.
How people think.
Right. So basically, so when I'm a person who wears glasses, right? So I'm a disabled person because I cannot see without my glasses. I depend on my glasses for vision, which makes me disabled. A person who is actually traveling in a noisy train, when we are traveling in metros or when we are traveling in a very noisy train, and we cannot we cannot listen to what is being said. We depend on captions that are written there. Especially when in metros, when you travel, if you're from Kochi and you travel in the metros, very largely we depend on those written instructions, which is the next stop where you have to get out, or which is the next stop that's approaching. Even though there is a voice instruction that is being given, it's not because nothing is wrong with my hearing, but it's because the place where I am is too noisy, and that makes me disabled from hearing something. So everybody at some point of time, it's just that disabilities can be permanent, like people who are having disabilities from birth. It could be temporary when you have a fractured hand, or it could be situational. But whatever may be the case, we are disabled, or we become disabled at some point of time. So we can never think about universal design being a charity or being something that we are doing for people with permanent disabilities. And it's not even about disability, the case. It's actually a design that will cater to the changes in human capacity. Today I might be able to do something. Tomorrow, if I break my hand, or if I am on a wheelchair for some reason, or I have had an accident, whatever may be the reason, I should be able to use the same system even then. And that is what is universal design. Across a single person's own lifetime, across a single person's ability, depending upon his age, his gender, his situation, where he is from, anything, that person should be able to use the system every single day. And that is where universal design comes into the picture. So whenever we think about disabilities going forward, never think that it is a person who is handicapped, it is a person on a wheelchair, it is a person who is having neurodivergent conditions, are people who are disabled. Today we may not be, tomorrow we might be. Okay, so that is how your human diversity should always be the starting point for universal design. So what are the 7 principles of universal design? When you are starting to develop a solution, or when you're starting to develop some kind of process, or anything for that matter, what are the 7 principles that you have to always consider if your system can at least be 80% universal? The first one is equitable use. That is, it has to be useful for people with diverse abilities without singling any person out. Okay, that means there should be, for example, there should be an automatic door that opens the same way for everyone. Rather than having 2 doors, okay, this is used for disabled people, this is for non-disabled people. We should not have 2 doors that is catering to 2 categories of people. The same door should be able to act as an entry point for both disabled users as well as for non-disabled users. And that is what is equitable use. The second principle is flexibility in use. That means many a times, if you are left-handed people, right, you might be experiencing that many things that we use on a daily basis have been built with the assumption that this is being created for handed people only.
Got disconnected.
Oh yeah, disconnected.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's for me alone, but the last sentence now it's okay.
Was it for everybody?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Fine. So the second one is flexibility in use, which is, which have to accommodate a range of preferences and abilities. That means many of you, I see another example which you're all familiar with. These spiral binded things that we have, right? For a left-handed person, the spiral bind comes on the left-hand side. So if the person has to write something on the record book or on a book which is spiral binded, definitely that spiral bind hits the left hand, which makes it inconvenient for that person to use. So a simple thing, just like a spiral bind, is inconvenient for left-handed people. Primarily assumed that only right-handed people are using, probably project reports or things like that. So flexibility. When we are creating a design, we have to make sure that there are a range of preferences, there are a range of abilities that have to be considered. The third one is simple and intuitive use. Okay. Regardless of your experience, regardless of language, regardless of your education, regardless of anything, the application that you develop, the solution that you provide must be simple and must be understandable by everybody who is just using that system. There should not be a provision where you are trying to show off your expertise in English, or you're trying to show that you have good grammar, you are excellent in, claiming very complicated systems. Solutions are not the place to show that. It has to be simple. It has to be it should be used by everybody without a lot of help from others. So it has to be simple and intuitive. The next one is perceptible information. Perceptible information means it should be communicating across multiple sensory abilities. That is, a person who is hearing impaired should also be able to use. A person with visual impairment should also be able to use. A person who is, a little bit intellectually disabled should also be able to understand. You have to develop a system like that. For example, a fire alarm. If the fire alarm is only having this, tring sound, okay, what happens? Only the people who have, okay, but if a fire alarm has got both sound as well as blinking lights or some kind of, flashy things, that makes it more suitable for use.
Rishmi, actually, it is breaking often. Okay, we'll just wait. I think
yeah,
Rishmi is
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah. I think there's something wrong with my internet connection. So is this better? I don't know whether it's going to stop, but is it better for the time being?
It is better. It is better. Actually, it was not like it was just being bits and pieces. We were getting the essence of what you were talking, but not fully.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that, Sweta. Okay, so I'll just repeat. I think perceptible information is basically it has to communicate across multiple sensory abilities. The next one is tolerance for error, where any unwanted consequence because of an accidental action or because of an unintended action, it should not. It should let you undo that action rather than punishing a wrong click. That means people are prone to make mistakes, right? So suppose I click a very good example is like, you don't have a confirmation button before canceling or before deletion. So by mistake, I click on delete, and whatever my records get deleted, that's I did it accidentally, but there's no way that I can undo that action, right? So it's always better to have a confirmation button before cancellation, which means that there is a tolerance for error. Even if you're trying to make a mistake, the system is actually stopping you from doing that. Is something that should be a part of your universal design. Low physical effort, you should be able to use it comfortably. This is more in case of physical solutions, that is a door handle, or that you can that probably when you have to, the example that I was talking about earlier, when you have bags of groceries in both your hands, you should be able to push it with your elbow. The door should not be so strong that you really need to have somebody else to come and open it for you. You should be able to do it yourself, probably with another body part, and that is where low physical effort comes into the picture. And the last one is size and space, space for approach and use. Again, from a physical design perspective, your reach, the view, the space that you're taking, or the space that actually is required, regardless of your size, posture, mobility, it has to cater to that. When we approach certain counters, the counters will be of the same height. Probably short people might not be able to use those reception counters. Only tall people might be able to use. So those things should be considered when we are designing a physical size. So in short, when you are always trying to create a design, and if you want to make that design a little bit universal, these are the 7 things that you should consider. It has to be equitable, it has to be flexible, simple, very, very important. It has to be perceptible. Your design will not be the best if you make it complicated. Always remember that the design is not a place where you have to show your technical competence or your knowledge about things. That's not how it is. It's always about how easy is it for the person to use. Okay, tolerance for error, that is, even if the person makes mistakes, we should not punish them for making a wrong click. Low physical effort, and size and space. And this is something that is not built from the air. This is something that has been developed by the Center of Universal Design, that is from North Carolina State University. Okay. Next one, what are the kinds of universal? Because many of us are working on websites, as part of your mini projects or your major projects, you might be working on websites, you might be working on mobile applications, etc., etc. So when we talk about digital and information accessibility, what is important? Whenever you're working on something related to a digital, platform or a digital system, always make sure that you are reading the WCAG, that is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They explain how to make digital content. Okay, how do you make your digital platform accessible to people with visual impairments, auditory impairments, physical impairments, speech, cognitive disabilities? What are the checklists that you have to keep in place if your web platform or a digital platform has to be used by more people? Okay, now just because it is online, just because my application or my digital platform is up and running, it doesn't mean that it is online. Okay, now just because you have a lot of information in your website or in your mobile application, you cannot say that my website is content rich. Okay, a website only becomes content rich when people can find it easily, people can understand it, people can do some actions and get proper outcomes. Only then your web application is actually worthy of using. Okay, they talk about a lot of things. WCAG, for example, they talk about how you need to have these real heading styles, that there are some font sizes, font types, which are readable, which are the norms. You have to use those rather than the decorative ones, which make your application look good. You should always have alt text. That is, when you are always giving an image, don't assume that the person will understand everything from the image. You should have an alternative text for information. Your reading order, exactly the website should be in the order in which you think the user would be able to find it. There should be a search option. There should be caption for videos. Every link that is there should be descriptive. It should be working. Your language that you use should be short, direct sentences that is self-explanatory. Okay, so go through the WCAG guidelines before you create a digital platform to understand how accessible it should be. Even going forward, most of the government sites, they are in the process of making accessibility as one of their complaints, because it is very important to make sure that every website is accessibility friendly. So what are the accessibility features that should be included in your website is also something that WCAG will tell you. Okay. Now, when we talk about physical structures, the first thing that will come to our mind is ramp, and say, let's do something, let's make the building inclusive. Let's build a ramp and the problem is solved. Okay, and that's the first question that is often asked. Does it have a ramp? Definitely the ramp matters, and the ramp is very, very important. But is ramp the only thing that we have to consider when we're talking about physical accessibility? The ramp itself can exist and can be unusable, right? Sometimes the ramp, I have seen in a lot of buildings where I have been to, do you have a ramp? Oh yes, we have a ramp. Where is it? At the back of the building. And that back of the building is an unusable place where, forget about people with wheelchairs or people who need a ramp can go, even people who don't need cannot go, because it will be filled, it will be in some place which is unused, where there is no proper, door, the doors might not be working. So ramp mostly becomes a compliant related matter rather than actual usage. So the ramp itself can be unusable, right? A ramp can be steep, it can be slippery, it can be blocked, it can be locked, it can be too high, it can be too low. So the ramp itself has got certain measurements which are required for building it in a physical structure. But at the same time, is ramp the only thing that is required? When a person is coming, a person who is coming, do they have accessible transport? Are there parking for disabled people? Can everybody use the same entrance in the same manner? Is the door, open, can be opened by everybody? Are the signs clear? Are there signboards which actually help people go to, I'm conducting a conference and there are multiple rooms where conferences are being held. Are there proper signages? Are the signages readable by visually impaired people? When there are instructions being said aloud, when there are announcements being made, are there provisions that hearing impaired people can read it? Is there a proper evacuation method by which everybody in that auditorium can be evacuated safely? All these are part of inclusive environments, not just a ramp. So next time you go and you talk about, is this an inclusive environment? Don't just look if there is a ramp, okay? Ramp is definitely one of them, but it is not the only one, okay? You have to remember that it is much more, than all of this. There is, I can actually talk about a lot of things, but in the interest of time, I'm not even seating options, handrail options. Are there handrails at any point of time you want to come up and down? Is there a clear wayfinding? Are there clear quiet areas? Are there areas where, for mothers? So all of these things make sure that you are you're building an inclusive environment. Now, what is the curb cut effect? Okay. Again, I'll just tell you a quick story. In 1945, that is probably after the Second World War, the streets of Michigan, again in the US, were not designed for people with wheelchairs, because there were all these, pavements where people could walk, and these curbs or pavements were not really, people with wheelchairs could not really climb on it. And when was this realized? Soon after World War II, there were a lot of people who got injured in the war. And there were these war veterans who were completely physically disabled. And many of them who were returning home could not really use these payments for their commute. Okay. So many of them, began to sit at home and, not do anything. But there was one person called Jack Fisher who understood that it was not the disability which was the problem. It was the way this city was designed. So what happened? He went to the city commission and he asked them to cut small slopes into curbs. Now these are called curbs. That is small slopes in between the roads where you can actually enter the pavement, or you can get onto the street, is what happened. And that is how curbs came into the picture. Now, while curbs were originally built for wheelchair users, for war veterans, etc., who uses them today? We have parents pushing prams. We have all old people using walkers. We also have people who want to overtake the other people, a walking person. They use curbs, travelers pulling luggage, children learning to cycle. A lot of people use curb. And this is called the curb effect. And it is one of the most cited concepts in Universal. So it was the other way around. No? Mostly what happens, we build something for the non-disabled people and the disabled people end up using it. But in this case, it was a designing solution that was built for a specific group of people who were excluded from using one of the facilities that the city had to offer, but it ended up benefiting almost everyone, right? That is the entire effect of designing proactively in the first place. Something that I had already mentioned earlier, I'm not going through this in a very detailed manner. When we say universal design, it should, you should not only think about the visible barriers that are right in front of you. You should always think about people who are cognitively, not as enabled as we are, people who cannot, listen to a lot of sound, who's got this kind of anxiety, claustrophobic, neurodivergent, emotional, variations. All of those things should be considered when we are taking about universal design. Now, it's not that every solution, every product has to cater to whatever is being talked about, from a universal design perspective, but you might think about, some factors, at least to a larger category of people, if they can cater to, it's well and good. Okay. And this is the essence of universal design. Always design with the people. Do not design merely for the people. As I already mentioned earlier, do not sit in your classrooms and design solutions for people with autism. Don't sit in your classrooms and decide that I'm going to build this, mobile application for learning disabilities. It will not work. You have to design with them. You have to listen to what they have to say. You have to get your prototypes done. You have to test it with them. Okay, listen to their suggestions, because they know how it is going to operate. They know how it is going to be used, and they should be the end users. Whatever solutions that you create today or tomorrow, in your colleges or after you leave colleges, you have to always make sure that your solutions are being used by somebody. And for that, you need to know who will use it. Never create solutions for getting marks. Never create solutions for scoring. Something, for gaining something. Make it useful for people, and that is where the actual success of designing solutions come in. Okay, some misconceptions. If I, when I bring in a lot of features, universal design will cost more. It will cost. I'm not saying it will not cost, but the cost is going to be very less compared to the cost that will happen to fit it later. Okay, that's not just in universal design, it's always in software development as well. You think about your requirements, you think about all your requirements, ask questions, get those answers at the very beginning, because that is much less costlier than making any changes to the system later on. So cost, never do anything from a cost effective perspective. Just because it is costly, let's keep it for a later point of time. If it is useful, it should be done at the beginning. The second myth we already discussed, universal design will replace accommodation. It will not. It will only supplement it. It will only improve. It will only reduce the barrier. You cannot replace accommodation, altogether. There will be somebody for whom accommodations will have to be done. And the third myth, you create a universal design, it will fit everyone. Okay. Universal design definitely creates the flexibility, choice, compatibility, but it will only reduce the exclusion. Just like, the earlier myth, there will be people who will be left out at some point of time. And that is where accommodations will come into the picture. Okay, again, this is another, I don't think I have time. It's already 8:05, okay. This is another example how a person invented these, the vegetable peeler that many of us use in kitchens, many of our mothers use in kitchens. It was actually developed by a husband who noticed that his wife, who had arthritis, was not able to use the common peeler or a common metal peeler to hold, and that is how a specialized metal peeler came into the picture, and that is a universal design that has come. And you have a lot of these OXO good grips. If you go and search for them, you will see how it has been redesigned for people with arthritis or other physical problems, and that's called assistive device. Closed captions, another powerful design, because many of us, when we want to see movies in a crowded place and we don't have headsets, we open up these captions, right? So earlier it was created for people who had hearing impaired. Today all of us use it. When we want to listen to the videos on our phones, when everybody's sleeping at night, we switch on these captions. So closed captions is something that we all use at some point or the other. Tactile paving. Tactile paving was something that was created by a friend in Japan, who wanted to help his friend who was losing sight to navigate the streets safely. So nowadays we see these in a lot of places, this tactile paving. We see them in railway stations, we see them in airports, but many of us do not understand why they are there. Okay, it's basically helping visually impaired people take a path or understand a continuous path. That is why you have that tactile paving. So next time you look around and try to understand what are the accessible features around you, which was originally built for disability, but is being used by everybody nowadays. So this is a checklist that you can use. If I create this design, is there anybody who can get excluded? Can people participate independently? Are there multiple ways to access information? Has it been tested with diverse users? So checklist goes on. This is just some checklist that I created based on whatever I had mentioned so far. Now I'll just take 2 minutes to also talk about what Punarjeeva. I'm here representing Punarjeeva, so I think it's my duty to also tell you what we are doing in the space of universal design. Now, we are creating a lot of solutions. We are a social enterprise. We are working in a lot of domains for the neurodivergent in terms of their physical rehabilitation, their education, their cognition, social behavioral. We are working on a lot of that things. But of late, we have also started enabling students to understand inclusion and what they can do to reduce the barriers in the society. So we have come up, or we are empowering something that is known as the Samnita Social Inclusion Lab. Samnita stands for inclusion. It is a student-operated space where technology meets empathy. Okay, we have set up these labs in quite a few institutions where it is being driven by college students. The college students will go and visit nearby places, which is kind of marginalized. It could be special schools, it could be Anganwadis, it could be elderly care centers, it could be old age homes, it could be any place. They go there, talk to them, try to understand what their problem is. Is there some kind of assistive technology that can be given to them, any kind of kits that can be given to them? They go back to the labs and build these things using maybe additive manufacturing like 3D printers or laser cutting machines or anything that they have in their labs. They build this based on the requirements they not given to them, that they themselves have discovered. They take it back to those institutions for testing. They give it to them, and they do a lot of that stuff. So that's what we are doing in the space of inclusion. That is what we are doing to make sure that not just there are startups or there are companies who are working for a marginalized community. We need everybody to work together, and it's not that you're helping them. They should also be able to help you. You get help from them, you help them. That's how it has to be. It has to be a two-way bridge where we try to identify, we try to understand what the society looks like, who are the people in our society, and try to start thinking from an inclusive perspective. Going forward, whenever we think about any solution that you want to build, just think about some nuances that this session has covered, which will help your design or solution become more inclusive. I'm not sure how many of you are from Thrissur, but if any chance you happen to visit the Puttanpalli at Thrissur, you can see that there is a braille engraved platform which is actually talking about the I forgot the name of of that entire journey that Jesus.
Patience of the Cross, Rishmi.
Yeah. So that entire journey that Lord Jesus had from the time he was sentenced till his crucifixion and his his rising again, that entire journey has been engraved for visually impaired people to actually understand it. Otherwise, before that, it was just stories that they heard. They could not experience it. But today, there are platforms where they can touch, they can feel each story, they can read about it, they can understand who are the people over there. Everything has been done for a visually impaired person. So, and this was done by one of the colleges in Thrissur under the Samhita Social Inclusion Lab. So if you ever get a chance, please do visit the church at Puttanpalli and you will understand what inclusive design actually talks about. Okay. So that's basically it. I took, I think, 10 minutes and my next meeting has also got postponed, but it's fine. So always remember that universal design does not mean special design for a few people. Okay. We are not designing anything for disabled people. We are not doing it for them alone. It is a thoughtful design that is for the entire human diversity. A design that you may think is not useful for you today, you might have to use it tomorrow. So always remember, when you are creating a solution, when you are creating a design, it is for everyone, each and every person out of the billion people in the world that we are creating for. And that is what is universal design. This is not a concept that we can just explain in 1 hour or so. There are lots of nuances, there are a lot of perspectives, there are a lot of parameters, lots of examples which will help you understand. But I just have one request. Next time you go out, next time you go and go to some public places, you visit some places, look around you, look around you, try to identify what's accessibility here. How will people use these systems? Is there any improvement that can be done there? What kind of improvement would have to be done? So start thinking from that perspective. And I think that will really help you design your solutions in a big manner. Okay. And I think with that, I'm putting a stop. I'm not going to take any further of your Friday evening from you. I'm open to questions. And I'm thankful. I also have a couple of colleagues working with me who've joined me here today. So yeah, they will also answer your questions. If I cannot, yeah. Any questions? I hope the session was useful. There were moments where my net got disconnected. I was a bit fast, but I hope overall I could do a little bit, I could justify in some manner, and you have some takeaways from the session today.
Participants, if you have any questions, you can ask it now.
Hi ma'am, I'm Devika. So my question is, what is the one misconception about disability that you wish everyone would stop believing?
The very misconception about disability that I would want people to stop believing is that they are disabled. Okay, they are not disabled at all. We should start focusing on their strengths rather than their weaknesses. Okay, if they are disabled in a physical manner, in the normal terms of what we call disability is, when a person is physically challenged, is what is disability in the normal definition, right? But they are not disabled. Every person who is on the face of earth has got some ability one or the other way. If there is a physical challenge that is limiting them physically, always understand that there is a cognitive ability that is surpassing them in ways that we cannot do. And because of that, we are, to give you a best example of this, why I say that they are not disabled. There was a time when we thought that, these people in your colleges or, going forward, you'll be working in a lot of places. It'll be very difficult for you to find people who are intellectually challenged or people with cerebral palsy or people with autism. You will, I hope the number increases, but right now they are very low. And the reason is because we believe that they will not be able to work like us. We believe that, they do not have the abilities that we possess because they have not gone to an engineering college, or because they have not been given training, or because, they have not gone to the so-called typical schools, that they cannot work like us. But believe me, if you give them the proper training in the way it is beneficial for them, tomorrow you might have a person with cerebral palsy working alongside you in your company. Okay, it's just that the system, going back to what I have been mentioning all throughout, we do not have a system in place where their skills can be brought into the picture, where their abilities can be brought into the picture. And that is why they are still regarded as disabled. You change the system, you bring in something where, you can hone them. Definitely, they are also just part of us. And that is the biggest misconception about disability, that they are disabled. They are not at all disabled. They can be enabled and they can become like me or you, or even better than us in ways beyond imagination. I don't know if Smita or Sri Lakshmi, Prasi, my colleagues who might, have experienced other misconceptions, but yeah, according to me, this is the biggest misconception about disability. I hope I have answered your question, Devika.
Thank you, ma'am.
Rashmi, can I add my bit of thought into this?
Yes.
Just, I won't take much of your time. Exactly what Rashmi said, I agree to it. But I would request, this is a student young crowd, please refrain from using the word disability, because nowadays we call them differently abled. So that very term, disability, should be removed from our dictionary. So we are all having one ability or the other. So we might as well call them differently abled. So that is a request. Wherever you go, going forward, after you have heard the session and from Rashmi, don't call them or don't use the term disability anywhere. Call them differently abled. Okay. Thank you.
That's a very valid point. Thank you, Sri Lakshmi. Actually, the word disability is something that has been discouraged from a very, from various aspects. We should not be calling them. They should not be referred to as, which is, that's a very valid point. Thank you for bringing that into the picture. Because it's kind of, an offensive language nowadays. So refrain from using that.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an insightful session. As a token of our gratitude and appreciation, we are delighted to present our virtual memento to Ms. Rashmi Ravikulnath for taking the time to share her valuable knowledge, experiences, and inspiring perspectives with us today. Thank you once again for being a part of IncluTalk, Voices Shaping Inclusive Tomorrow. We are truly grateful for your time and contribution.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for this opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am.
And
Before we conclude today's session, let's capture this wonderful gathering with a group photo. I kindly request everyone to switch on your camera and smile for the screenshot. Thank you, everyone. Now, to formally conclude today's session, I would like to propose a vote of thanks. First and foremost, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed speaker, Ms. 𝗓𝗶𝗃𝗃𝗏, Chief Digital Officer at Punarjeeva Technology Solutions, for delivering such an engaging and inspiring session. Your insights into universal design have encouraged us to view inclusion not as an added feature, but as the very foundation of meaningful innovation. I would also like to express my sincere appreciation to IEDC Vidya Academy of Science and Technology, IEEE-ATII, and the IEEE Education Society Kerala chapter for coming together to organize this wonderful initiative and for creating a platform that promotes dialogue on accessibility, inclusion, and innovation. A special note of thanks goes to all the organizers, volunteers, and coordinators whose dedication and hard work made today's event possible. Finally, I extend my sincere gratitude and thanks to all the participants for joining us, actively engaging throughout the session and making today's session meaningful. Thank you all once again.